I've got a few more just coming in. I'm going to start my presentation. If you're able to give me a thumbs up and just let me know um, when you're able to see that, it would be great. All right, well, kia ora koutou, and thank you for taking the time from your busy schedules to join me for this webinar on local water done well. My name is Andrew Lebiota. I'm the manager of Water Reforms Transition here at Napier City Council, also just known as the Water Guy at this stage. But yeah, thanks for joining us. This is a bit of a first for Napier City Council having a webinar like this, so really appreciate you joining us. Let you know that this is going to be recorded and will be available at our Say It Napier page for you to visit later on if you'd like. Now, please pop your questions into the Q&A as we go, and we'll look to answer these at the end of the presentation. Now, we've allowed for an hour of this. I'm not too sure if it will take that long. And if you need to drop off, please do so. Again, we could come back to the recording if you'd like. And as well, just to let you know that we do have a community meeting scheduled for Wednesday, the 4th of June from 5:30 p.m. at the Napier War Memorial that we'd love to see you attend. Right, so what do we mean when we're talking about water services? So that's our drinking water or water supply. So that's the abstraction, treatment, and distribution of potable water for our residents, industry, and as well for firefighting. We've got wastewater, which is the collection, treatment, and discharge of our wastewater, and stormwater, which is the management of our everyday rainfall as well as flood mitigation. And that one's a bit of a complex relationship that involves land use planning, drainage channels, pump stations, and a series of retention dams within our network. So this is a bit of a quick snapshot of what water services look like in council. So water assets make up nearly 1/3 of all of council assets. Most significantly is the proposed level of capital investment over the next 10 years, which is around 700 million that we have forecast in water services expenditure. And this ambitious capital program makes up nearly half of the proposed capital works to council over this time. So we have our water supply. Now this is just a picture of two of our reservoirs over in Taradale. Roughly 93% of Napier's population is served by our reticulated water supply. So now currently our water supply network is deemed non-compliant by Te Mata Arawai, the regulator for water quality. We lack the adequate protozoa barrier at some of our bore sites. And because we only have one distribution within Napier, because a few of our abstraction points are deemed non-compliant, that makes the whole distribution non-compliant. Now, although it's non-compliant, I want to assure you that there's a minimal risk to public health, and there's robust testing in place to ensure that our drinking water does remain safe. As well, we have a very comprehensive program of work within our water supply master plan to address this. So the program of works involves new bore fields and treatment plants at our existing Taradale and Awatoto abstraction sites. And these plants will ensure that we meet the needed compliance. We have new reservoirs planned for Mataruaho and on Mission Hills, and then as well the associated pipe network and booster pumps to feed the reservoirs from the new bore fields. So all of these projects are progressing through various design stages with physical works anticipated for 2027. So we have our wastewater. Now this is one of our biological trickling filters during construction in 2014. We have two of those, and that's some tertiary treatment for our wastewater. Local water done well. Well, this is the current coalition government's replacement of the previous Three Waters reform. In early 2024, central government repealed Three Waters reform and replaced it with the Local Water Done Well reform program. So one of the key differences to Local Water Done Well is the retaining of local decision making. So the previous Three Waters reform was mandated by central government. There was a national team assembled responsible for the creation, design, and implementation of the regional water entities. This originally started with 4 regional entities and then grew into a 10-entity model. Under Local Water Done Well, local authorities need to evaluate possible delivery models themselves, consult with community on these models, and then ultimately make the decision on the future model considering community voice. And that's where we are today, consulting with you, our community, on the options and our preferred option for water services into the future. Now, it should be noted that change is a must. This new legislation means we cannot continue as we are. We cover more of this legislation on our Say at Napier page, or you can visit the DIA website where they've got a plethora of information. So one key aspect of this legislation is financial ring fencing. So Three Waters activities must be ring fenced from the rest of council. Revenue collected for water services must be spent on water services, and this revenue must be adequate to cover all costs, including operational costs, interest rates, and debt repayments. Beyond this, Local Water Done Well policy will also introduce Commerce Commission as the economic regulator. It also provides greater powers to Tamata Ottawa as the regulator of drinking water quality and environmental performance standards. So water service providers will need to be very transparent about their plans, expenditure, and performance through information disclosure to these regulators. This information will then be published to promote the understanding of how the provider is performing relative to other providers and can track changes in performance over time. So knowing that we need to change, how did we decide on the preferred model? So our region has a long history in evaluating different delivery options around water services. So in response to the 2016 Havelock North water outbreak, the 4 local authorities of Hawke's Bay commissioned a report completed by Morrison Lowe to look at alternate models for delivering water services in the region. This work assessed the options against 6 investment objectives and a further 7 key principles. This can be viewed at the HB Waters website. So these objectives and principles were tested and determined to still be valid at a regional collaboration day in September 2024. However, it was identified that the need for an assessment criteria that took into account current policy direction and reflected the views of the Napier community was needed. To achieve this, officers workshopped with councillors to determine 6 key criteria. So we had value for money, services that are cost effective, and efficiencies are realized where possible, and provides long-term financial sustainability to the organization. We had enhanced delivery and capability, so the ability to optimize delivery of the capital program, but also having a model that provides long-term sustained growth for employees and enables a very high level of professionalism. Increased resilience, and this was twofold. This was how well the organization can respond to a significant event from an operational level with staffing, but also the ability to access funding if large-scale recovery works were required. We looked at community and Monofenua engagement. So an organization that has the capacity to meaningfully consult with community in Monofenua and meet those expectations. Then we had ease of implementation and minimizing the impact community. So the first 4 were identified as lasting principles, foundational to the success of the model, whereas 5 and 6 address the risks regarding the implementation and establishment of a new model. How easy would it be to set up? And ensuring that you, the customer, is not impacted as we transition into a new model. So looking at these models, we have to be aware of the challenges that we face. So council has a bow wave of deferred renewals ahead of us. And then under economic regulation, we must show that we are adequately planning and investing in this area. On top of this, we need to address the shortcomings in our water supply that is currently deemed non-compliant. And to deliver the capital program to address this requires increased debt. As well, we need to be sure we adequately invest for growth and resilience to address climate change. Ensuring we deliver on all these challenges will have a direct impact on the costs of water. So touching on the costs, it can't be understated that no matter what option, costs are going to increase. So the figures presented here are indicative based on financial modeling with best information to date, and these costs are per connection. So through our financial modeling, it was discovered that within a regional water organization, costs would look to be about $2,000 per connection by financial year 30, and then that increases to $2,800 by financial year 34. Whereas an in-house model or an in-house CCO would be looking at $2,300 by financial year 30 and increasing to $3,100 by financial year 34. What this illustrates is for the ratepayer, a regional CCO will provide the lowest cost option. So what are the options then that we assessed? When legislation was announced, 5 possible options were presented. 3 of those are on the screen here as a regional CCO, a Napier-only CCO, or council-controlled organization, and then in-house delivery, essentially how things are done now, but making changes required under legislation. There were 2 additional models presented, which is a mixed ownership of a CCO and a consumer trust, or a full consumer trust model. Now, the consumer trust models were not evaluated because they are not eligible for local government funding agency financing, or the LGFA. The LGFA is the lowest cost lender available to local government and CCOs. So not having access to this financing would make the option much more expensive than the 3 that we did evaluate, which are on the screen here. So some of the key differences between 1, 2, and 3 would be looking at governance, asset ownership, and shareholder influence. So in option 1 and 2, by establishing a CCO, governance comes outside of local government. Those options would be governed by a board of directors that need to be based on their competence. So industry professionals with backgrounds in finance, asset management, who have experience within the water sector. With the in-house delivery, or option 3, governance would remain with elected members. For asset ownership, assets would be transferred for 1 and 2, assets would be transferred from council into that CCO, whereas in option 3, assets remain with council. In option 1, the regional CCO, shareholding would be split amongst the member councils that we evaluated, which are Hastings, Wairoa, Central Hawke's Bay, and Napier. Now, shareholding is something that still needs to be discussed as we move forward, but no council would have more than 50% holding, and it does allow for the lower household costs over time. With the Napier-only CCO, assets would be transferred to that organization, but council as the sole shareholder in that organization would then essentially retain control of those assets. So the costs of those options that we did evaluate, again from earlier slide, by financial year 2034, we'd be looking at $2,800 per connection per year. Option 2 and option 3, you're up at $3,100 per connection per year. One of the main differences that we allow for there is efficiencies realized within option 1, and then as well cheaper lending that comes from LGFA. Essentially, if you have an organization with scale, you're going to have preferential lending requirements from the LGFA. Option 2 and option 3 are very similar because the ongoing costs and lending costs remain quite similar. So what was our preferred option? Well, the regional CCO was determined to be the preferred option. This provides for the lowest cost to ratepayers over the long term. It meets more of the assessment criteria. It develops scale. It allows for greater capability and professionalism, a larger, more skilled workforce, stronger planning across the region, and it's more future ready. We meet the requirements set out by central government, and it gives us the ability to adapt to change. Now, being a shareholder, council is still able to give effect to community needs through the statement of expectation that it would issue to the board of directors, and your voice matters on this. So we would like you to visit Say It Napier, understand further what you would like, and then please make a submission. So some key dates from here. On the 4th of June, on Wednesday, we have the community meeting at the Napier War Memorial Center. 15th of June is when consultation closes. So you have the ability to submit up until this date. So again, visit Say It Napier, please. And then 21st of July is when council will be hearing submissions if interested. So from there, happy to take any questions if they've come through. All right, so we've got one here. It sounds like we're doing plenty already. If we keep doing water the way we are now, will our water costs stay as they are? That's a very good question. We definitely are doing a lot already. If we stay the way we are, will our water costs stay as they are? Unfortunately, that is a no. As I alluded to with the bow wave of renewals and expenditure required, and the needs from the economic regulator to ensure that we are adequately funding renewals, depreciation costs are going to increase. We simply have to clear the backlog of deferred renewal. So another one, how will you make sure Napier gets what it needs when it's sharing budget and staff with Hastings, Wairoa, and CHB, which have far bigger water worries? Now, I can't comment on who has the bigger water worries. I think everyone has challenges across the region. But this is something that would really come through that statement of expectations. And that's, I guess, furthering the understanding of how the organization works. So with the regional CCO, we would have the joint councils coming together as shareholders, and then those councils as shareholders issue a statement of expectation to the board of directors. Under legislation, the board of directors must give effect to that statement of expectations. Within that statement, you would foresee that, especially from a Napier perspective, the Napier shareholders would want the prioritization of the needs of Napier met. So it's a lot of agreements, a lot of foundational documents that need to be developed and agreed to, but it's in that shareholding expectation that you would ensure that your community's needs are met. How would a regional CCO model comply with Te Mata Arawai's drinking water rules if one of the three partners is non-compliant and the other two are? It's a great question. I would anticipate that it would actually be network dependent. When you report back to Te Mata Arawai, you actually report on a per network basis. So if the one network, in this case with Napier's, would be non-compliant, but the Hastings network, let's say, was compliant, it would be a matter of making the targeted upgrades to that network to ensure that it does meet compliance. In any of the three options, is the council exempting those in rural properties that are not connected to water, wastewater, or stormwater from any additional charges? Now, that is a great question. Unfortunately, I cannot answer that directly right now. But if you're able to provide some details, we can get back to you, or we will post this onto our frequently asked questions page on Say It Napier to get your answer. Someone would like to know more about metering and likely costs for water due to the reforms. Metering is, I guess, a very sensitive topic. Nothing has come saying metering is necessary. If you looked at economic regulation in other parts of the world, Australia, United States, I believe. What the economic regulator does want to see is fair and equitable charging for water, and that could be seen as water metering coming. Again, it hasn't been mentioned, but it is something that we are monitoring very closely. What is the current annual cost embedded in local and regional rates for water services? Very good question. Again, I don't want to give an incorrect number on that, so I will come back and we will post that on our Say It Napier page. I think what we will do is look to say what your current annual rate is in the facts, so you can have the answer there. Are we likely to shift to residential water meters? Again, kind of touched on that. I don't want to go into metering too much, but it's something that we will be monitoring closely from central government and the economic regulator. In the regional CCO model, how would priority be decided in terms of critical reactive works or infrastructure improvements? Would priority be on a population? Sorry, I just need to expand this. Population served basis. My concern here is that one of the partners may dominate, and that balance has to be shown to be a truly regional approach. Great question. I think it's a concern that a lot of residents would have once you start looking at a regional model. Again, I would say this comes back from that statement of expectation from shareholders on how you actually prioritize works that needs to be done. I think critical reactive works would always take a priority, and then scaling down there on what targeted improvements would be made. An interesting study, I think, is Tasmania. They went through a significant water reform roughly a decade ago. And one of their big priorities was clean drinking water for all their communities. So they prioritized a number of treatment plants throughout Tasmania so that they're able to eliminate boil water notices across the island there. And that was all set out from the early onset of some foundational documents of that was the priority. So I think all of that setting would be done during your statement of expectation, the constitution that is set out for the regional model. And again, statement of expectation is something that can be reviewed over time to ensure that the needs of community are being met. Will it be fluoride free? From a Napier perspective, we are fluoride free. Hastings is fluoridated, but again, as you look at it as it's an independent network, I don't foresee the need for fluoridation coming into the Napier network at this time, so long as we meet the compliance requirements mandated to us. Assuming feedback doesn't change the path, when would you expect this to become a reality? Great question. We're working through some of the implementation planning at the moment. Some indicative timelines we have looked at would be 1 July 2027, 1 July 2028. 1 July 2027 would align with the council's LTP cycle, and if an LTP amendment was required. And as well, through the implementation plan, we're looking at different ways of going about this. It's do you build the spaceship completely and then everybody gets on board, or do you actually do a bit of a stage transition where certain services would be contracted back to council to support that transition into the new entity? So a lot of work's going on into that planning space, but we don't have a definitive answer yet of when implementation would actually occur. So with the average cost per connection estimates, would a one-person household potentially pay the same as a four-person household? Great question. Yes, because everything currently is a per connection charge, a one-person household would potentially be paying the same as a four-person household. Now, I suppose there could be ways to look at how that can change, but under the current model and how we currently charge and what was forecasted from, that is how charging would work, just on the per connection basis. From the annual cost you showed for option 1, is that a per household in Napier only, or is that per household across the entire Hawke's Bay region? So that is an annual cost per Napier only. In our modeling, we have kept pricing targeted to the region. So Napier does have a different price path than Hastings, then Central Hawke's Bay, and then Wairoa. There's been some discussion of what's called price harmonization, which is alignment of pricing, but we did not go too far down into that because if you look at other regulated utilities such as electricity, price harmonization doesn't really exist in those utilities. It's more reflective of what the charges in the network would be. So these are discussions that we will be having as we progress. But at this stage, what you've seen is just for Napier and not the entire Hawke's Bay region. If not all 4 councils agree to option 1, would the councils that do want option 1 go ahead anyway? Great question. That is going to be put to elected members shortly in the near future. We would like all 4 councils to go ahead with this, but we have not really planned what the fallback would be if, let's say, 1 or 2 councils does not want to go ahead with this. So that's some work that needs to be done and what are the exit ramps and the alternative pathways. But at this stage, how we've been progressing is on the notion that the regional entity would progress. Just have one more here. Is it expected that the stormwater plans will accommodate another cyclone incident? Very good question. We're doing significant planning around our stormwater network and options to mitigate those risks of flooding. I suppose it's very difficult to plan for any event, but one of the lessons from Cyclone Gabriel are planning for exceedance events and having some resilience and planning in your network of water discharge for an event that does exceed, the 1 in 100 that we're trying to 1 in 50 events, 1 in 100 events that we are trying to target. So yeah, a lot of planning going on, but nothing definitive that I could say at this stage that would accommodate that next event. Right, I'm going to answer just one more here. And does the regional council fit in with the models in any way? Another very good question. There is actually a very discrete side piece of work that's going on between Napier City Council and the regional council. With our stormwater network, we have a bit of a mixed ownership model where HBRC actually owns some of the stormwater channels within the urban environment. So on the side, we're actually working through how does that look for either Napier City Council or the regional entity to take on ownership of those urban waterways to ensure that there's just that one point of responsibility for managing and upgrading that network. So we're working through that. Again, it's been a bit of a discrete piece of work outside of what we're doing here with the other member councils. So something to just, keep your eye on. So I can actually say there's a few more questions, and we'll look to get back to you on those when we do have the answers. Again, we'll be looking to populate some of the frequently asked questions section in our Say at Napier page, but really want to thank you for joining us. Please head to Say at Napier, look through the consultation document, some of the other information that can be found there. Please make a submission. Join us at one of our council engagements if we can. And again, just really want to thank you for your time.